This is the Houndsman XP Podcast.
Good dog, get that bear. Get that bear in
The original podcast for the complete houndsman.
Look at your coat and go, Justin! We're gonna get him! We're gonna get him!
The podcast that represents our lifestyle of extreme performance.
Get him there! Get him! Get him! Yeah! Good boy! Good boy, Ranger!
Uniting houndsmen across the globe, from east to west, north to south.
You know, if you're going to catch a cat or a lion, you know, you have to have teamwork.
We take you to the wildest places on earth.
Yeah, so how many days a week can you spend in that?
As much as I can, to be honest with you. Anytime that I get, I'm out there.
Join us for every heart-pounding adventure on Houndsman XP.
I'll tell you like I tell everyone else, I'm going to hunt whether you're here or not, so you might as well be here.
Happy New Year to the Houndsman XP faithful. I am fresh out of bear camp. The month of December was very good for training young hounds and getting a lot of exposure. The bears were plentiful. They were fat. There was a lot of food on the mountain. Good sign for bear hunters in the Appalachian Mountain Range, that's for sure. Just like when all houndsmen get together, bear camp produced several good topics of discussion about hounds, about training hounds, about breeding, and, you know, all things that houndsmen always talk about. And one of the topics that came up in bear camp this month was slick treeing. And Heath Hyatt joins us for this deep dive discussion into tree problems. Is it bred into them? Is it trained into them? How we can avoid it? And it's just a common problem that everyone is always talking about with our hounds. And the old timers say there's too much tree bred into our modern day hounds. And this discussion is going to help kind of get through the weeds on this whole thing and maybe provoke some thought on, you know, can we be contributing to this? Do we want to get away from it? It's all here, folks. Before we get there, I got to tell you that if you have not joined us on Patreon yet, you need to, and I'm going to tell you why right now. We just wrapped up our annual Patreon drawing, and we gave away over almost $2,000 worth of merchandise from our sponsors during that drawing. So if you think about it and you go in and you join us on Patreon at the highest level at $12 a month, then the prize package for that annual drawing was nearly $1,000. I'm not a great mathematician, but the person that won that almost made all their money back in one drawing. So we do monthly drawings, we do semi-annual drawings, and we do an annual drawing. And when you join us at the $4 level, you're eligible for all those drawings for the monthly drawings, which normally run up to about $100 a month. So for basically $1 a week every month, you stand to get a return on your money for the whole year. At our mid-level, you qualify for all those monthly drawings plus the semi-annual drawings, and there's 2 of those a year. And then at our highest level, you qualify for all of those monthly drawings, both semi-annual drawings and the big annual drawing every year. We try to pay this back to you, our patrons who are supporting us on Patreon, not to mention the fact that Seth is really ramping it up this year with more bonus material for our Patreon community. He and I just got done recording 2 tailgate talks, which are exclusive for our Patreon supporters. So join us on Patreon, and you can go to houndsmanxp.com, support page, and it'll take you right into Patreon, and you can start supporting us for as little as $1 per week. As we wrap up 2021 and we move forward into 2022, I want to take the opportunity to say thank you to all of our supporters and listeners out there. Houndsman XP is rocking, and we're up there in the top with the highest rated hunting podcasts in the world, and it's all because of you, because you click that subscribe button. You have given us a great review over on iTunes, and you're just engaging, and we want to thank every one of you for that. Guys, I'm going to get over this pre-roll here. The Old South Dog Box is rocking. We're going to talk a little bear hunting. We're going to talk some tree problems. We're going to talk about training your hounds. It's time to dump the box. Just start out with some small talk about bear hunting.
Yep.
And
went today.
like that. So
had a split race, and Dot trailed one up, went over in the north, and Forrest was able to get two dogs in behind. She was caught down right off the steep of the mountain, and Forrest or Fuzzy got out with two of Forrest's dogs and put them in behind her, and they went off. Boone went off and went to her, and Waylon split. I don't know what happened there, but they were caught. So me and Maddie went around the mountain and come up through some property that I know the people, and they give me permission to drive up into the farmland, and we got up about 300 yards from them, and it was 280, and then they started moving back up the mountain. And long story short, Dot and Boone took the bear up underneath the cliffs and started heading back east. Got, 3 or 4 hollers over from us, which was, about 1,000 yards. And Boone just pulled up treed. And Dot kept going on, and she was barking every breath. And we're like, what is going on? Well, then we hear another dog treed, and so Waylon had got with Boone, or vice versa. We don't know what happened, but they had the cub, and Dot took the sow and went on out the north of the mountain and crossed over the south in that area where you would know that's where that's at. And she made a big loop through there and a couple of zigzags, and finally we decided we don't want to pack dogs because we don't want dogs tore up, because we knew it was a sow bear. And Forrest and Fuzz.
She took the bear up over the north slope and then over down the south side?
Back in there where you treed, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And this is after having it caught probably for a good hour and a half over on the north.
I wonder if that's what Jazz did the other day. If she took you think she took a cub on down, and I had a big sow caught there up on my end?
Went to the same place. It literally, she went in there and went down that path that you went down and tried to cut her. And she turned to come. I think he turned her, actually, and she come back up the mountain, and Forrest was able to run her down. And then where she crossed out, his dogs exploded again. So we know that, that was right. That's very possible. I never thought about that, but that's very possible. From where you was at, went over in the same place, over in the north, in the same place. Yeah. So that's probably the same thing. Yeah, honestly.
Yeah. I'm just curious, because that bear I caught down in there was a nice bear. It obviously wasn't a cub. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering if she didn't have a yearling with her, and Jazz took the yearling on out, and Diablo and Cajun stayed on the sow.
Well,
I don't know.
After
I couldn't tell when it was in a tree. It kind of looked like a sow, but at the same time, it was just hard to judge. When I got in there, she was sitting on her butt against a tree, and then when I walked in there, she got up, and the tree was so small. She was balled up, so you couldn't tell any features about her and stuff, and so you couldn't tell. I couldn't tell.
While we're on sows, let's talk about conservation of our sport for a little bit, because this is a topic that comes up in our group a lot. We try very hard. You've been with us. You see, we try very hard not to kill the sows. There's been 6 sows killed in this one area that we hunt. And the way I tried to explain it to the guys that I hunt with is, you got to look at the overall picture. 6 sows, and all of them were mature sows because they were healthy, they were big. None of them was under 170 pounds. So you killed 6 sows. Next year, if they produce like they should have They should have 2 cubs. That's 12 next year that you've taken. And then next year after that, that's 24, and the next year after that, that's 36. And then you start breaking down
higher than that, I think.
Well, then you start breaking down to 36, because half of them, if they're sows, after that third year, they're going to have cubs. Right. So you add another 15 on top of the 12. Yeah, so, I mean, it's devastating when you start killing that many in an area. And I mean...
Well, one of the things we talked about, though, and I'll play the devil's advocate from the part that, the scientific side of it. You know, Virginia is... experienced that mange outbreak. You know, it's been heavily advertised and things like that.
Yep.
And that's a population density related disease because they've got to pass that among each other. So I get what you're saying, and I like what you're saying, and everybody wants a lot of bears to run, but what if you don't kill the sows, what's the state going to step in and do to start eliminating those if you don't?
Yeah, I mean, that's
open question. I don't live there. I've just been over there hunting with you guys. That's just a legitimate question.
Well, the problem is the complaints are not coming from the land that we hunt. It's coming from the private land where all the bears seeking refuge now. Mm-hmm. And you know, I had said this before. I don't know that I have the answer for this because you can't on a kill permit in Virginia. You can't use dogs. So when the farmers get corn damage permits and they get to go in there and kill them, you know, we can't use them. I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that because it's definitely an issue. They want to decrease the population 25%. But again, we're not having the issues on the national forest where we hunt. It's all down in the private lands and the places that the bear don't need to be. And we should, as a group, as an organization, whatever, we need to come up with a solution before they do just open it up for everybody because you know, we love to run and tree bear. You know, it's not so much about taking the game, but we know we have to take them. You know, sometimes and sometimes you don't have a choice. I mean, and sometimes you just don't know.
And I like what you're saying. I mean, I'm just trying to play a little devil's advocate there. But, you know, so the bears that are causing the problems are areas that you normally don't hunt anyway.
Or you can't hunt because it's a small tract of land. Yeah.
Right.
You know, Betty Sue's out here feeding her birds, and you know the bear come down and getting the bird feeders, and she's an animal lover, and you know she's got her 5, 10, 15 acre, 20 acres of land, and I mean you can't hunt there, but then you know she starts causing some of the problem by continuing to feed the animal, and you know how the animals are; they're coming back for a good meal, and
we get a lot of that stuff with coons here in Indiana. You know, personally, I don't care what happens to a coon in a dumpster in Aurora, Indiana. You know, I'm not hunting there anyway. So I mean, I do care, but I recognize the problem that those people have. So it's not as much of a concern. And, you know, in my line of work, then it always became my problem when somebody has a coon eating a cat food or in their bird feeders or in their trash. And I know officers down in Virginia and different places where there's bears, you know, they laugh when we start talking about coon problems that we had here in Indiana. They said, "Man, you ought to have a bear in a cornfield and see what kind of damage you get." So, no matter how you slice it, the number one complaint that wildlife managers get is wildlife human conflict. It's a thing. I mean, I've seen it set policy, make changes to hunting regulations, and it's all to solve a problem that some bureaucrat has to satisfy
his constituents,
the community.
That's right.
His constituents. You know, that's what it boils down to. It really does. I mean, and unfortunately, a lot of times, the people that are footing the bill, the hunters out there, don't get enough of a say. But I'll also tell you that hunters need to make sure that they're a part of that conversation from now on, because that is how wildlife policies and laws and things are getting passed and made. Hunters aren't showing up, you know, and houndsmen are the worst at showing up.
Yes, we are. We
As a
got.
rule.
We have to do better if we want to. We want to preserve the sport that we love. We're going to have to, especially, our right to retrieve law gets every couple of years. It gets hammered and brought to a vote, and we narrowly scrape by. We narrowly skate by, which is good. But it's going to come up again here in the next couple of years, and we're going to be having this conversation all over again. So, hey, I'm with you.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, and I'm not trying to be the outsider looking in at Virginia. The last thing you need is me telling people what they need to do in Virginia. I go through that every day on social media about people trying to tell everybody what to do, and I hate it. But as short as the bear season is in Virginia, that leaves a lot of time for houndsmen to get involved in organizations that can protect your rights. And you don't have, you got time. We always make time for the things that are important to us.
Prioritize, yep.
Yeah. I mean, we can make time for watching some dim TV show and we'll rearrange our whole schedule for the week to make sure we're home on this certain night to watch a show or a ball game or whatever. And as much as we love hunting and our hounds, it's like, man, I really don't have time to go do that. And I think we need to change. That's why we created this podcast, is try to change that culture and that mindset.
Yeah, the more people you can get involved and do it professionally and be productive, because I've been to some of those meetings years ago where it just was a shouting match, and that doesn't help anybody. Sure don't look good on us, but
Right.
hopefully things have changed a little bit since then. So,
well, I think you guys, knowing the areas that you guys are hunting, I think there's nothing wrong with the thought process you're having right now, about conserving those sows and trying to keep bears in those areas. But you got to remember that every habitat has a certain amount of carrying capacity, and once it gets full there, they're going to spill over, and they're going to be in the subdivision, and they're going to be in the crop fields. When there aren't enough acorns on the mountains or grapes or whatever, then they're going to go find them.
Yep.
And so it's a balancing act. It's one of the challenges that wildlife managers have, but man, we can do so much more to help swing that in our favor, to get our organizations involved in bear studies and find grants to do it. And I mean, there's a ton of stuff we could be doing.
yeah. No, I agree. I mean, and like I said,
Yeah.
I'm probably guilty because I probably need to participate more than what I do. So,
Well, I was effective in giving you a guilt trip because I think you are a good guy. You are a good guy. You are a good guy to be involved in that, Heath. I mean, you're considerate of people. You understand the big picture. You've been a public figure through your law enforcement for a number of years. You've dealt with the public for years. You got to be a guy that can, look at both sides of things and sort through the stuff and leave the emotion. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff that you'd have to offer there. So I think I'll call the president of the Virginia Bear Hunters Association. And
yeah.
tell him you're ready to step up.
Yeah, I may have to do that one day.
Yeah. Well, hey, we kind of had a train wreck last night. We tried to do this last night, and it was just a train wreck. I think we both agreed. We thought about it last night after we got done, and we thought about it today and thought, man, we could have done a better job with that. So we're doing a do-over, and I don't like do-overs, but I think this one is worth it. And Heath, you're a professional dog trainer. You're a master trainer for police canines in the state of Virginia. You've done a lot of work with international dog trainers, and you got a lot to offer the hound hunting community. And we're going to talk about some issues that these hounds have at the tree, around the tree, things like that. And this all came from a conversation we were having in bear camp last week, and kind of made a crossover into how it affects our hounds. And go ahead and set that up for us, how that conversation came about, because I think it's an entertaining story, but the other thing is it ties it all together.
because we was eating breakfast actually. I don't remember what morning it was, but we were eating breakfast and we got on canine training. Oh, I had to work Monday, and they said if I had canine training, and I said no, I didn't have it. But I said, if you're willing to take the bite, because he's been saying he's going to take a bite from my dog, which means you're going to get in a suit and let the dog, apprehend him. And then he starts backpedaling like he always does. So we started aggravating him about that, and he was like, yeah, you just go ahead and send that dog, and I'll throw a toy at him, and he won't pay no attention to me. And that started a whole new conversation about, proofing the dog and making sure the dog was going to engage the suspect or whoever we're sending him after, and not the training stuff. And then we talked about self-rewarding. Yes. And I think that's when it piqued your interest when I said self-reward. And then you and I got into a conversation about, hey, does this apply for the tree dog? Can the tree dog self-reward? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. It can absolutely do the same thing that our dogs do. And we were actually talking about tracking and getting a bite at the end of every track. And it's been
lay that out a little bit about what you meant by self-reward, and we'll try to draw this together and then go into the tree dog stuff. But explain how a police canine self-rewards.
So the easiest example is giving a dog a bite at the end of every track. So we go out to training, and you lay me a track through the woods or through the city or the town or wherever we're at, and the dog tracks you up, and at the end of the track, bam, dog gets a bite. And the theory is that bite makes him track harder, kind of like our dogs catching game. Mm-hmm. So that's a theory. And I was like, yeah, no, we don't do that, and here's why. Because there's been numerous cases throughout the United States that show that several times dogs have been tracking, and especially it happens a lot more in the suburbs or in within the city limits or town limits. You'll be tracking into an apartment complex, and you turn the corner, and somebody's standing there, and then the dog's like, bam, I got him. He latches on, and it's actually an accidental bite because that's not who you were tracking. Mm-hmm. So that's when I was explaining that the dog just self-rewards. He's done with the track. He found somebody to latch a hold of, and he don't care if it's who he's tracking or not. He just wants that end, the fix of actually getting the bite. So we don't do that. We track to the human scent, and we do a lot of different things. And then I let my dog get a bite 2 or 3 times a year. He don't need a bite every time. Dog knows how to bite. When I tell him to bite, he knows to bite. So I don't need to be doing that after every track. And I don't want to form bad habits, which we'll slip over. I don't want to form bad habits where, I'm tracking through town and I go back behind Home Depot and, pops out some guy stacking lumber at the end of his shift, and my dog just grabs a hold of him. So
right.
That's a self-reward. The dog is either frustrated or tired, or he just wants to be done. And I know we'll go over this. Dogs are cheaters. They are going to do the easiest method they can, and if we don't make them work for that, they're going to shortcut whatever they're doing if it benefits them. And the end game for that is to get a bite. And so the dog just shortcuts it and grabs a hold of the first person he finds because I've done my job. Dogs don't. We all know that. He
thinks he's done his job.
Dogs don't have the ability to rationalize. Dogs act. That's what they do. They act. Mm-hmm. So
why do you think? Why do you think those? You said you don't have to. Your dog knows how to bite. Your dog. I mean, you do work on biting and grip and stuff like that, and we'll talk about that a little bit because we'll do that crossover as well. But you're saying that they are genetically wired to do that work, right? Your canines.
They should be.
Okay, they should be.
Yeah,
that's good enough.
They should be.
Yeah,
I mean, it's hard to get. It's hard to get a dog with the right amount of fight drive that enjoys going to the fight. because that's basically what it is. When you when you get a bite, that's what's happening. But yeah, I mean, we practice, we run scenarios, we try to put the dog in as many different environments and situations as we possibly can. And whether it's tracking, and I tell my dog to bite, or I'm sending him on a felony stop to go in a car and pull somebody out, or I'm sending him in a building to clear a building. I mean, the dog knows when I give him that command that, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. There's no confusion with him on this because we practice it so much. Repetition is how you train. Repetition. So the dog knows what he's supposed to be doing. So if genetically, if they want to bite, it's just making sure they're biting the right thing, and that's your responsibility as a handler to try to make sure that, well, it is to make sure that you're not getting those accidental bites, so the town or the county has to pay out those huge lawsuits for it.
Right. Well, in this whole concept, after this whole discussion, and I wanted to redo it here so people would understand what I was thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
When you told me that story, I immediately started thinking, is the problem with slick treeing related to a dog trying to, or not trying, he is self-rewarding? And that's what kicked off this whole concept and idea to talk to you about for this podcast. And so I want to talk about, get your opinion on that, but also go back to some foundation stuff that we can do to avoid it, and talk about some other factors that are involved there. So what do you think? Do you think a hound is capable of self-rewarding, and it could be I'm not it could be a factor in slick tree. Do you think that's possible?
I do. And, the more I learn about dog behavior, it's easier to understand what we're talking about because you kind of understand what's driving the dog and why the dogs do some of the things they do. So, yeah, a dog can self-reward by treeing because what's the end game for the houndsman is to catch or tree, and most of the time we're treeing, depending on what part of the country you're in. But in our, my end of the country, I mean, we tree a lot more than we ever bay up. I mean, we'll bay 2 or 3 bear a year, but for coon hunting, I mean, the end game is to tree the coon, right?
Right.
So yeah, I mean, if the dog, and I know we had talked about this, there's a lot of things that can go into why the dog does it, and that's the first thing you ask yourself is why, what happened to get me here, and then that leads us back to the foundation work. And is it training issues, or is it the dog's genetically programmed to have too much tree in it? Where, when we've owned those. I've owned a dog or two like that. That, of course, I didn't raise it as a puppy either, and I definitely didn't have the experience that I have now. But yeah, a dog that pulls up slick. Did the coon go up the tree and cross out? I mean, it's possible. But if we know for a fact that dog just pulls up on a fence post, and we know what I'm talking about, the little trees and whatever. Yeah, I mean, the dog's probably just, he's frustrated, he's done, he can't take it anymore, and I want Dad to come and get me that pet on the head because I know that's what's coming. Mm-hmm. And they just pull up and do that. And it's, when you flip that over to big game, and we can talk about the differences in each one. Big game's a little different than the dogs are treeing more by sight on the big game, where the dog, for coon, is treeing more on the nose. And I think when we wrap all this up, it all comes back. It all comes back to the nose. Don't let the dog use the eyes. He needs to use the nose. Mm-hmm. So,
well, what are some of you mentioned 3 different things there that this could hinge on. It could be with foundation, it could be with training, or it could be genetic, right? Were those the 3 things you said?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's go through each one of those. Let's start with foundation, and let's talk about some of the things that may contribute and I call it unacceptable behavior. There's certain things that hounds will do. There's no perfect hound, so we learn what we can live with and what we can't live with. And for me, slick treeing is one of those things that, I have no use for it. And I think most houndsmen get extremely frustrated with that. But I think there are some things we can do to set them up at the early stages of life to avoid those problems down the road.
Yeah. So before we talk about foundation, you got to ask yourself why. Like, why is the dog doing this? Okay. So if we're looking at foundation work, how did you train that pup as a young pup? And we've talked about this, guys listening. If you've got a tree dog, you don't need to encourage him to tree. It's going to come naturally. And the more you encourage that, the more you are prompting this type of bad behavior. If he's a young dog and he's tree happy, you need to notch that back a little bit. But we go back to the foundation of the training. How much game is he seeing at 5, 6, 7 months old? Are you catching game and getting a roll cage and rolling it around and then hanging it up in a tree and taking pictures so all your buddies can see it? How many times are you doing that? If it's more than a couple of times, and when I say a couple, 2 or 3, you're doing it way too much. And you're just causing that dog to switch from nose to the eyes, and you're causing that excitement. And that excitement is what's going to get you some of those problems later on. And we'll talk about that on the big game side too. So, go back to the nose, and I talked about this a lot, especially when I do demos or I teach a lot of citizen classes for the public. We do those each year. The dog is a locating tool. It don't matter what kind of dog we have, if we're using a police dog, a military dog, or a hound. That's what the dog does, is locate. Then we ask ourselves, okay, what's he locating? Coon, bear, cat, fox, coyote, whatever it is. Okay, then what is he using to locate that? He's using his nose. He's not using his eyes. I can't find dope without the dog telling me, hey, it's here. I can't find the guy hiding in the building unless the dog goes in and starts, giving me indicators, whether it be barking or whether the dog starts scratching or whining or whatever. Let's throw that over into the hound world. The same thing. Most dogs, when they start locating the animal that they're desired to chase, most dogs start opening. Whether they're tight. We're not going to get into tight mouth and loose mouth and all that. But the dog's a locating tool, and to locate, they got to use their nose. And if people would just take a step back and say, okay, how can I best use this hound and best train this hound by giving him the proper foundation? And I'm not saying the guys don't have good methods to training, because I don't know everybody. I don't know what they do or what they don't do. But I can give you some guidance to where to get to help yourself down the road from having some major issues. The dog's got to use his nose. So if you're using game more than a handful of times, then here's my suggestion. You're using it too much, or you need to put that pup back up and let him mature a little bit. Because we're having to prime that puppy to go and do what is going to probably come on later in life, because he's going to mature a little bit slower than the dogs that are doing it at 4 and 6 months old, 8 months old, whatever it is. So
that's something that piqued my interest right there. You're using too much eyes, but the thing you said was put him up and let him mature.
Yeah. We get in a rush, and I've been guilty. I've been guilty of this, but now that I'm seeing behavior from dogs on a different level and in a different environment, I completely understand. And you and I had talked about this before, and I think we said it in our first podcast. The Europeans don't use police dogs until they're 3 years old. Mm-hmm. And I know that most houndsmen's not going to keep a hound around till they're 3 years old before they're like, okay, now I can go use this dog. I'm not saying that. But I'm just saying, take a step back and saying, okay, if if these people that are producing world quality police dogs and military dogs are saying 3 years old, then I may need to wait a little bit. And I'm not. Everybody has their own preference. I'm not saying, I'm not saying whatever. And I always like to get past the baby stage into the juvenile adolescent stage, which is that 15 to 20 to 22, 24 months old. And you got to take the dog into perspective. I think everybody wants that 6-month-old that's jamming up, running and treeing, and they are out there. And those dogs are really, if you have one of those dogs that is natural doing that, you have got a very good genetic makeup of a hound. But don't burn him out. Let him be a pup. Take him here and there. But you still got to do the foundation work with the environment stuff. But
it's hard to leave them in the truck, Heath. When you've got one, it's hard to leave them in the truck. I've almost blown them up before. It's just hard to do that because you're excited about the pup. And then, when you talk about coon hunting and with baby stakes and everybody wants to have the 11-month-old night champion, grand night champion, qualified, whatever, man, it's hard to do. It's hard to put the brakes on it and let that pup mature.
Well, so you've seen my 2 pups that I have, and they're not a year old yet. And I got grief during August and September for leaving them at home. Mm-hmm. And I would take them sporadically. I'd take them once, maybe twice a week. I was very cautious on where I put them in and how I put them in. I did not want them on a mean bear. I didn't want them getting beat up. And everybody kind of was like, their pups are running and they're doing this and they're doing that. Hunt them. But I know my long-term goal is to have a 4-year-old dog that is consistent. It's not to have a 10-month-old pup that runs in trees and looks like a world beater. I want that dog at 4 years old to lead my pack. That's what I want.
Does he look like a world beater, or does he just really look like an outstanding 10-month-old pup?
It's an outstanding 10-month-old pup that everybody gets excited about, just what you said. And if I was coon hunting, it would be a little different. Big game hunting, I'm not in a rush. Like I said, I'm looking at my long term, So for the coon hunters that are listening, if you're running those baby stakes and the super stakes, and I don't know all the words for all those, if you're running those things, you got to look, are you planning on keeping this dog for the entirety of its life, or are you going to get some money on it and sell it? Because the chances are that when their pups are that age, 6, 8, and 10, they're under a year old, okay? When they're that age and you're putting that type of pressure on them, at some point in time they're going to break. Mm-hmm. And they're probably not going to finish out at the quality that you would prefer. Not all, but most. So there's that catch in there. You're going to have some genetic freaks in that bunch that just are phenomenal dogs and phenomenal hounds, and they do exist. I know that. But not all of them are going to be that way.
Well, that's part of the hazards of we go to the clubs. So you get on social media and you see everybody with this wonder pup. You can tell whatever story you want on social media, but they're rare. It's a rare thing to have that sort of a dog that can handle that sort of pressure at such an early age. And the whole reason that I got involved with big country at the level that I did was because I had Jazz at the time, and she was a freak. 5 months old, she treated her first coon. I was hunting her by herself. I'll tell you exactly the night it happened. I was hunting with a guy that he's probably hunting with her as much as anybody in the world except me. And he just loved hunting with her. And I unhooked her one night. She went 15 feet, and she just stopped, and she turned around and looked at me. And I thought, I tried to shoo her on and get her on, get her on out there. She wouldn't go. And it just clicked in my head right there, luckily, because I'd been a canine handler for several years at that time, and I thought, I'm getting ready to blow this one up. So I took her back to the truck, put her in the box, and that's the other part of the story's another thing, but I had to put her up in order to give her a break.
Yeah, I mean, pups at that age, and they're puppies. I mean, at 5 months old, 6, 7, 8 months old, in human life, you're looking at an infant. I mean, really, you're looking at an infant. So when you're,
do you believe in that? Do you believe that dog years equals 7 years of human life? You believe that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, the dogs, they mature so fast. You know, once they, like I said, once they get through that adolescent, you know, and we've all said this, you know, your old dogs are gone just like that. Like, okay, 4 years old, I got my dog where I want it to be. 5, 6 rolls around, and then 7, you're like, oh man. And then 8's here, and it starts to slow down a step, and then 9, and then, I mean, they go way too fast, fast. So let's go back to the using the dog's nose.
Yep.
Let's try it. Let's come up with ways to encourage the dog without seeing as much game.
Mm-hmm.
And I have tried several different methods. I've tried dogs that I've never showed any game, but I would go catch it, turn it loose, take the dog like we were going hunting, and start walking that track with them. Mm-hmm. And I didn't sick them on it. I didn't hiss them on it. I just walked in the direction that the animal went and traveled, and I watched their behavior. And then if they got, and I had an old timer show me this bear hunting years ago. You know, dogs would strike an old bad track, and they'd trail over. They trail in the north where the sun hadn't hit, and they get over in the south, and the dogs start losing it because the sun's hitting it.
Right.
And he just keep walking in the general direction, and then they'd end up running down in a hollow where the shade's good and the dew was still on. They'd pick that track back up. So same thing. He was helping his dogs without helping them. You know, he was traveling in the same direction the game was going. So you can do that, and I've done it, and I had success doing it. Got to go back to your dog selection, which is very important in my job. Dog selection is one of the biggest things you can screw up if you don't pick the right dog. And I think, you know, when you go back to the foundation is picking the stock. I know a lot of people, you know, breed their own dogs and use their own bloodline. And, you know, what are you looking for? Are you looking for a dog? If it was me and I was I think any hunter that hunts hounds should be looking at accuracy, period. I want dogs that produce accuracy. I want dogs that don't get bogged down and self-reward by pulling up when they get frustrated. Mm-hmm. You know, I want dogs that have a little bit of brain. Well, like a whole lot of brain, but you know, I want those dogs that are a little bit calmer. For me, I don't like if a dog don't have a clear head, he can't work through problems. And then that goes back to the excitement part. How much game have I showed them? You know, have I hung that game up in a tree, let them tree on it 50 times or 10 times, 15 times? You know, that dog gets excited, and he gets a little bit of odor. Maybe the coon went up and fed in that tree and come back down and went on. I don't know. I'm just saying. And then, okay, well, he jams up on that tree because that's where the last odor is that he had going up. And he hits the first thing that goes up because in his foundation and his training, everything was always above his head.
Right.
So, you know, that's a training issue. You know, that's on the trainer, whoever's training that dog. And then let's talk about the big game side of that. Same thing. You know, you take a couple pups and you showed them some game, and you know they're running and treeing, and it's like the pack of beagles. If anybody runs beagles, well, you went with Alan. Yeah. You know, they make a lose. One beagle barks over here left-handed, the whole pack, oh, right to them, and then they take off. And that's what happens a lot of times with the big game is, you know, you got a pack of dogs, and one dog gets excited and starts, loose mouthing, well, then you've got a tree-minded dog in that pack somewhere, and the next thing you know, you're pulled up treed, and everything's treeing because one dog started barking. Dogs are pack animals, and now you've got 6 or 8 dogs barking up a tree where there's nothing in it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's an issue. And again, it goes back to your training, your foundation work, and it goes back to handling too. Knowing how to handle your dogs and.
Let's talk about some handling stuff. I think I've seen a lot of creative problems. They've got a well-bred pup. They've got a dog that's got a lot of talent, but the mistakes on the handler side of it is what is causing a lot of their problems. And there's a reason why I feel pretty confident in my opinion on this, because I've made these mistakes. I've done it. One of the things that I've seen a lot of guys do, they get excited about a pup. He's showing a lot of promise. And the first time he barks up in there down this fence row, then they run in there and they're shining lights up in the trees and they're trying to find game above their head, and they want to put that pup on that tree. They're afraid he's going to leave. Instead of being a little more patient, letting him problem solve and figure it out. And I'm talking about the first half dozen times that dog trees. If you've done a lot of yard work with that dog and worked with him, you've sat there under the tree and you've tried to get him treeing and petting and beating on trees and doing all this other stuff and trying to get them dialed in. And then when they do it in the wild, we have a tendency to want to run in there and do the same thing because we're afraid they're going to leave, instead of sitting back and being a little more patient and letting that dog problem solve and truly commit. And for me, a pup at a young age, if they miss, I'm happy that they've got the guts to take the chance to try it. I don't get excited about it right out of the gate. What are your thoughts?
It's okay for the dog to fail. And we talked about self-discovery on top of self-reward. Mm-hmm. The dog will learn more from figuring it out himself than for dad or mom shortcutting the process and trying to teach him to do it. So what I mean is, you was talking about, going in there and shining the tree. I used to coon hunt a lot, and I've had several people say, don't put your light in the tree, don't put your light in the tree. Well, looking back at it now, I know why, because they didn't want their dog jacking up treed. Mm-hmm. So self-discovery, letting that dog work and figure things out himself. Give him an extra 15 or 20 minutes. When you say, I'm not going to let my dog do that, I'm going to go on. Take a step back, put your watch on and say, I'm going to give my dog 5 more minutes. Let him work it and figure it out himself. We do that in the other line of work where I do it with police dogs. If it takes me 15 extra minutes to let a dog work through a problem and he solves that problem, then that is 2 months worth of work that I don't have to do because he figured it out himself. The next time he's going to know how to do it. Yeah. So if you've got a dog that is pulling up short, okay, ask yourself why. First thing you got to do. Okay, is it something I've done? Is it training? Is it the way that I've handled him? If not, then encourage him to go on and try to figure that track out. And there's a lot of ways we can do that, but encourage him to go on and give him time. One night of pulling your hair out to let that dog work through issues will save you months and months and months of training. And it took me a long time to figure that out. In fact, I learned that from the Dutch guys that come in and that I work with. They're like, Heath, stay back, let your dog work. Because we always want to, and I'll give you a simple when we do detection work for narcotics or explosives or whatever, we always want to go in there and we want to tap. Okay, check here. That's the same thing we're doing at the tree. Come on, buddy, get up here, come on. Don't do that because you're shortcutting the training session. I'm saying, okay, if you put your nose where Dad's hand is, I'm going to get my reward because that's where the odor's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And then it begins where I don't care if the odor's there or not. Dad taps here, and that's how we start getting those false indications, which
Right.
we don't want. And it's called
Which
cueing.
is a false tree.
Yeah, it's called cueing. You know, I'm cueing my dog. I'm setting that dog up for failure. So let your dog work those problems out. If it takes 2 or 3 nights of this stuff or whatever, you're gonna, in the long run, you're gonna come out way ahead of the game, and you're gonna have a dog that problem solves a lot quicker and a lot faster than most people, because most people cheat the system or cheat the process and help the dog do it. And when you help the dog, you're not helping him; you're hurting him. I'll promise you that. Through lots of experience doing this the wrong way, you're hurting your dog. You're not helping him.
Yeah. And I think that's, again, in our culture today, we want shortcuts. We want, how many videos are out there about life hacks and, different things. It's almost like we've bought into this thing in every part of our culture. How do you get rich quick? There's plenty of people in prison right now for Ponzi schemes and get rich quick schemes and not having that patience. And don't misunderstand what I'm saying, anybody listening out there. If I've got a 3-year-old dog that's still in there beating and banging and can't figure out how to tree a coon, I'm not going to hunt that type of a dog. I know what a coon dog is. I know what a tree dog is. I know what a nice one is. And so what we're talking about is a young dog that's in its formative years, and handling that dog correctly in order to get years of good, high-quality service out of that dog. It goes back to what you said, Heath. Man, take 15 minutes. Be patient. Let them work it out. Problem solve. I like the way you said it. Cuts months of work. You can move on to resolving another issue.
If people could see what I have seen with the self-discovery, when you say the light bulb went off, that's literally what happens when the dog's able to figure it out. If the dog is starting to get frustrated or tired, now there are times that I'm just going to stop the session, and even if it's a training session with hounds, there are times when I'm watching my dog and I'm like, okay, enough's enough, let's go. And it's okay to fail. I'm telling you, it's okay. You're not going to ruin that dog. If the dog's genetically programmed and you've got the right breeding and the right hound, it's not hurting. We always say, I want to end on a good note. That's not necessarily the truth anymore. Put the dog up, and we talked about building drive through frustration. It's okay
I want you to talk about that.
Yeah, it's okay to put that dog up. And in my world, on the work dog side of it, we build a lot of drive through frustration, and I can incorporate that into treeing and giving the dog game or not giving him game. We've all had pups that maybe they're not treeing, and maybe they're not doing what they're supposed to do at the tree, or maybe they even actually run into the tree and tree a little bit and start backtracking, or so on and so forth. And you've heard it on other podcasts, because I know I've heard it, about tie that dog back. You knock the game out if that's what you're going to do, and let the other dogs do their thing, and you praise the dogs up that are doing their job, and you move on. And you do that 2 or 3 times, you're building frustration because he's not getting to play the game with the other dogs. And I mean, that's how you got to look at it. He's not playing the game. He's not involved in that. And you will see pretty quickly that dog catches on, and dogs learn more from watching other dogs than anything you can teach them. They learn faster. Dogs are pack animals. They are watching. They are in the pack. They're watching the pack. They're seeing who's doing what and why they're doing it. That's not what we can't fill that role as good as another animal.
So let me ask you this: when you guys are doing your training over there, say you're doing detection work on vehicles, that's a pretty good spot to be able to. All our handlers always had all their dogs on leash at a heel position, and they would sit there and they would watch the other handler and dog go through the exercise. Do you do that?
Absolutely. We even bring crates. If we're doing muzzle work, we do that with muzzle work. We'll bring crates in and put the dogs in the crates and have them watching the whole session, maybe the whole day.
Yeah.
It just depends on where the dog's at and what the dog needs. But absolutely, obedience. The dog's there and he's watching the other dog go through his session. People say, well, the dog's just performing obedience. You watch that dog and see what he's doing. He's paying attention to what's going on, whether you think he is or he isn't.
One of the things that I started doing with young dogs, especially early, the first few times I'm hunting, if they're not treeing, things like that, is I always tie that young dog back and keep him back away far enough where he can see me interact with his buddies. And that's exactly what you're saying, and I wanted to reiterate that. Tie those pups back and let them see your old dog getting that affirmation and that reward and all that. And it could just be, dogs know if you're talking to them or if you're talking to another dog. If you don't believe me, your mother-in-law probably has a couple little lap dogs and one of them's jealous of the other one. You start talking to one dog when you go over there for Christmas and see if the other dog doesn't come over and want some of your attention too. And we reverse that and we put it in the woods. Now they understand what reward looks like because you've been working with them, and boom, you're talking to their buddy over here that's treed. They're sitting back here not doing anything, and goes back to exactly what you said. Yeah, they want to be a part of the game.
They do, and like I said, I've been very blessed, and I've got to see a lot of different styles and a lot of different things, and just learning animal behavior and dog behavior has helped me tremendously. And I don't have the best dogs in the world by no means. I'm just upfront about it. I'm going through a rebuilding stage, and I'm trying to put my pack back together like some of the older dogs that I used to have, because I had some really, really good dogs over the past, over the years. And I
wasn't even going to say anything about your dogs right now.
They're just average dogs. I mean, that's what they are.
I'm
we
just
get
giving you a hard time.
Blind hog find the acorn every once in a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, frustration helps. You have to get out of the mindset that my dog needs everything that he trees, because that's not the case.
Do you think putting too much game down on them can cause slick treeing?
I think it's a possibility. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think it can. Again, and then I have to go back to, it's probably going to cause problems if I've hung a dozen roll cages up in a tree at the house. And I'm probably going to have problems. I mean, if I could sit back and watch stuff, I could probably tell you what's going to happen and what problems you're going to cause if you do certain things. But I'm not able to do that. I see it with myself, and I do a lot of experimental stuff. Okay, so let me try this with this dog and see if this works, and I'm going to try something else with this dog and see if it works. And then I may take things from both of those experiments and tie them together to make this what I'm looking for.
Sure. Yeah. Let's talk about genetics. How much? Yeah. You said that was one of the problems. Could be part of the problem with a dog that's prone to slick tree. Jerry Mall, my good buddy, he's always told me, he's like, it's easier to take tree out of a dog than to put them in it, put it in them. So what sort of factor, you said it, so how does that factor into this problem?
Well, I mean, are we being specific about the way we breed? Are we being specific about the dog in general?
Well, I mean you take a pup that's comes from a line of dogs that are known as tree monsters. Easy treeing. Don't have to encourage them to tree. I'll give you an example. Is most walker breeders will tell you that they went through a period there where they were breeding for more tree. A lot of that was dictated because of night hunt rules and things like that, and I think that is wrong. to breed for that purpose, but it's hard not to do when there's a big check waiting out there for you for accomplishing that. But I think some of the breeders in the Walker breed that I respect have realized that that's caused a problem for them. And now they've got dogs, they've concentrated so much on tree that they've lost some of the tracking ability. So I'm talking about a dog that has been bred, he's predisposed, he's hardwired for it, you know, kind of like a German short hair pointer that points a bird wing without even thinking about it.
Yeah. If your dog is, you know, I said it earlier, I think, if a dog is programmed to tree, you don't need to encourage him any whatsoever. You're probably just going to make problems happen. If the dog is, and I'll give you an example. I had a dog out of Sackett Jr., directly off Sackett Jr., and a Grand Night Pine Creek Casey female from here at the house. The litter turned out really well. We granded several of those dogs out of that litter. And the guy that bred them, of course, he's been one of my mentors for years and still is, because I still call him and talk to him about stuff. Mm-hmm. You know, he's like, Heath, he's like, don't encourage that dog to tree. Don't do it. And when that dog was 4 months old, I had hung a coon up in a walnut tree there in the dog lot where I was at. I had just done it. I didn't do it on purpose. And I had that pup running loose there in the barn lot. And he come over there and he literally pulled up on that tree and treed until I moved him. He wasn't coming off that tree. I mean, I literally moved him off of that tree. Mm-hmm. And that's when Pappy told me, he said, don't encourage him. He said, you're going to get too much of it. It's already there. Mm-hmm. So I don't think I showed that dog maybe one or two coons before he just took off. And he was like what you said. I mean, I was hunting that dog by himself at 10 months old and treeing coons, fairly consistent. You know, I was missing some, but fairly for a 10-month-old dog, I don't think I'd really ever had anything of that quality at the time. Mm-hmm. And, you know, so yeah, if you've got a dog that's genetically programmed to tree, you probably need to back it down some and not amp it up. If I could give you guys a visual, we use a horseshoe. So imagine a horseshoe laying in front of you, and you've got dogs all around that horseshoe. So each dog is genetically going to be at the bottom of the horseshoe, at the top of the horseshoe, or at the bottom of the horseshoe. So if your dog's at the bottom of the horseshoe, he's going to need some encouraging. I need to build him up a little bit. But if my dog's already in the top part of that horseshoe, you don't want to do anything with him. I don't need a rattle-headed dog that's so excited that I can't do anything with him. Mm-hmm. And when my canines come in and they bring them into school, that's one of the first things I do. I evaluate where they're at on the horseshoe, and I talk to the handlers about that and tell them, you know, okay, so if your dog's up here in this top part of the horseshoe, we're not going to come in excited. We're not going to come in that high squeaky voice and squealing and making lots of racket and getting that dog amped up, because then I end up with a bull in a china shop.
Right.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in nice and calm. I'm going to give the dog his command, whether it's sook, fine, whatever they use, and I'm just going to calmly work that dog. But the dogs that's on the bottom of that horseshoe, when I come through the door, I'm going to be, okay, you ready? Let's go find him. Let's go. And I amp that dog up just a little bit to get him up in that upper part of the horseshoe. So you got to look at your dogs and see where they're at. But I still do not overdo the sight stuff. So when I'm talking about I'm amping that dog up and I'm priming him, I'm not going to do it to that. So that dog may need a little bit more praise at the tree. You know, I may need to encourage him a little bit. I may need to pet him up and watch him and lead him back over to the tree. Let him get his feet up on the tree and start treeing. And one thing that I have learned, and if you guys try this, you will see. When I praise a dog, I praise him from the nose to the tail. I rub him all the way down his body. And when I praise him like that, it has to do with the way the mothers raise them when they're pups, and the way that she soothes them and the stuff that she does to him. So try that a couple times if you have the dogs that you need to amp up a little bit, or give that extra encouragement. Let's use that word, extra encouragement, not amp. Mm-hmm. So, lead him over, let him up on the tree, and when he barks, I'm not going to encourage him to bark. Okay, so this is important. I'm not going to be tapping on the tree. Get it, boy, get it. Come on. Talk to him. I'm not going to be doing that. I'm going to lead him over the tree. I'm going to let him figure it out, and he's probably going to stick his nose up to the tree and start smelling, and he's going to put his front feet up. When he gives that first bark, now, good boy. I'm going to give him that praise. And then when he barks again, good boy. I'm not encouraging it, but I'm praising it. Yes. Does that make sense?
You're paying him for his work.
That's right. I'm not shortcutting it. I'm not giving it to him. Like we talked about, he's self-discovered. Okay, this is what I need to do. I smelt the tree. I got odor. Hopefully he's got coon odor in it. And I wouldn't do that if you don't see the coon. Let's add that in there. The big, whatever you're looking for. If it's, bobcat, bear, whatever it is. Never encourage a dog or praise a dog if you don't know. And we talked about that as far as like breaking game too. I don't break my dogs until I know 100% what they're doing. And I let them off with some stuff sometimes. I know, but it's not what I know. So, but yeah, so
I think we let some dogs off on some stuff the first time we hunted together.
Yeah,
we didn't get no correction. We just we didn't know.
Yeah, I think it's old bushy tail. That's what I think. But yeah, so make sure that you have the game in the tree before you do any of that. And then, like I said, let the dog work him over to the tree and let him figure it out. And you will see, he barks a time or two, praise. He barks, praise. And I can give you a good example of this. So when we do building searches, my dog's not very vocal, my police dog. He's not vocal at all. Mm-hmm. So when we do a building search, when he locates the human odor, I want him to bark. I want him to sit down and, just like he's treed. Yeah. Well, Pino's not very vocal. So I've had to work and build him through this. And I started out just like what I'm telling you guys, is I put the guy behind the door. When he hit that odor, I had the guy actually blow through the door seam. He blew. Pino's like, here it is, just to give him that extra. Okay, this is what I'm looking for. And as soon as he sat down and he give one little, just a whimper, I started. I can get about 30 seconds to a minute out of him barking now. And that's all I'm going to get out of him. It's not going to be any more. But if I can't hear him in 30 seconds to a minute, we've got even more problems. Mm-hmm. But the same purpose at the tree is just work. And it may take you a month to get that dog. I don't know what kind of tree dogs you got. If they want to blow down the top tree dogs, it may take you a month to get there. But if you just want a dog that's a steady tree dog, it may take you a couple weeks. It may take you 2 or 3 sessions of that and it be there. But it will work if you let the dog self-discover and reward him or pay him for what you want him to do without shortcutting it. If you start tapping on that tree and doing things and the coon's not there and the dog's not earning it, there's where you cause some of those problems that we were talking about.
Yeah. I like that horseshoe theory. We've talked about that before, because I think it's important if you want to be a houndsman and you want to be a good trainer and you want to have good dogs, you've got to learn to read dogs. You've got to learn that you can't approach every dog in the same way. You've got to figure out where they're at and then bring them the things they need to make them successful.
Yeah, every dog is different. And you're never going to have the same dog twice. Out of the hundreds of dogs I see, yearly through training on the police side of it, and the hounds that I've raised over the last 26, 27 years, I've got dogs that have some of the same characteristics, some of the same traits, but it's never the same dog. And that, I think that's what we talked about. There is no perfect dog. It's just what are we willing to tolerate and what are we not willing to tolerate with those dogs.
Yeah. Well, I think let's talk real quick about dogs that maybe don't have enough tree in them, and spend a couple minutes on that. One of the things that I learned, and I learned this from another guy as well, but I was in a terrible habit, if especially when I'm hunting a young dog and I've got an older dog there that's treed and a dog meets me off the tree. I think most of us will say, leash that dog in and lead him back into the tree. And I was doing that one night, and a guy that I know that's got nice dogs, he said, "Why are you leading that dog back in here?" I said, "Well, I want him to know where he's supposed to be." He's like, "He knows where he's supposed to be. Tie him up right where you caught him and let him listen to the party that's going on in there and see if he doesn't want to be there the next time." And so I always started, ever since then, if I've got a dog that wants to meet me off a tree, man, I catch them and tie them up right where they are. It may mean I've got to walk 150 yards, to pick up that pup. But what are your thoughts on that?
I would say in short order that dog's not coming off the tree anymore, just because of what we said. You're frustrating that dog because he was there, he was at the party, and he left. Mm-hmm. And now, okay, well, Dad or Mom's tied me up, 50 yards, 100 yards back, and you go in and you start making that party even better. Oh, yeah. I mean, if they've got the game and, right, whatever you're looking for, and you start praising them dogs up and a hooping and a hollering, it's probably driving him plumb ballistic. And I would say after 2 or 3 sessions of that, it may not even take 2 or 3. It may be one and done. Just depends on your dog. And I think too, when you talk about dogs that aren't as tree dogs, what are we hunting? Are we hunting coon where it's strictly nose? I've got a couple of my really good bear dogs from people that didn't like them coon hunting because they didn't tree hard enough.
Right.
But with a bear, I don't really need that because I may be 2, 3, 4, 5 hours out before I can get to them. And plus, most of the time in December, they can see the game.
Right.
And if they're leaving it after seeing it, then I've got even probably a little bit bigger problems that I need to work with. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
again, I'm not talking about a 2-year-old dog that's leaving trees. I promise you, I'm not going to be hunting a dog like that for very long. You usually got an ear problem or another problem going on there besides that. But I'm talking about young pups that you've got to make that impression with and handling them from the get-go. So.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good method. I've tried all sorts of things, and most of the time mine get tied back and not fooled with. Again, we're building that drive through frustration, and they're not getting what they want. And the dogs want our attention, and we all know they want our attention. That's right. What they live for.
I've done the same thing with young dogs that may go out for part of the race and then they come back to you. I'll stick them in the dog box and drive as close as I can to that tree. And our instinct is, let's get them out of the dog box and take them in there and show them what's happening. But, man, you leave them in that dog box and they're close enough to they already know what's happening in there. They've been there a few times, but now they've got to sit in the dog box. And if you're a big game hunter, they got their head out the rig hole or they can. But, yeah. That you get them close enough and you build that frustration, that drive-through frustration.
Yeah, and I know it's aggravating, but I've done that's one of my training methods is if I've got a dog down trailing and my pup comes back to me, or young dog, they get put on the lead and they don't get turned loose again. And if I've got another young dog, I'll turn it loose, and I just...
Yeah, he gets to see his buddies go.
Yeah, I just repeat. If he comes back, he gets on the lead. And I'm hunting 3 young dogs. I've got a good friend of mine. I've got his 18-month-old female, and then I have a 15-month-old male of mine, and then I've got, the 2 pups out of Spook that are 11 months old. Mm-hmm. And, yeah, if they come back, they get put on lead. And, next time, it don't take them very long, especially if that dog got any sense at all. They're going and they're staying.
Yeah.
Because they want to be involved, and I know it's aggravating leading dogs through the laurels and the thickets and the stuff that we hunt in and down through the rock bluffs, but again, 1 or 2 of those sessions, 3 of those sessions, you don't have to worry about it anymore. And the overall goal is to have the dog go and stay and be productive inside that pack, whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
if it's a coon dog, I mean, it would be just less dogs doing it.
Right. Well, Heath, I think that's probably enough to digest for one training session.
Ah.
Don't you?
Yeah, I mean, guys, just let
We
your
talked
dogs.
about a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, make your dogs use their nose. Don't give them the answer. Let them self-discover. And sometimes you got to sit back and figure out how we're going to do that because, it's not always a clear-cut answer. You may have to use a little bit of ingenuity and a little bit of creativity to say, okay, how can I set this up? And it's okay for your dogs to fail. It's okay for the dogs to fail. They're not gonna be 100% all the time. And one of the things that's important for the working dog side of it, we have to fill out training notes, every time we get that dog out for a training session. And I tell my guys, for court reasons, I know it's different for you, but you should think about it this way. For court reasons, if I open my training binder, my dog's 100% on everything, they're going to pick me apart because anybody in their right mind knows that this is not right. So we put our failures in there. If we don't find a person on a track, put it on there. If our dog walked odor, we put it in there, but then we put our remedial, what we did to fix it. So flip that over to the hound world. It's okay to fail. Put you some notes down on what happened and how it happened and go back and try to replicate that or give the dog time to self-discover. If I could give you one thing out of this whole thing, let the dog self-discover, and it will save you a lot of time down the road.
Perfect. Well, Heath, I appreciate your time, and we'll come up with some more good stuff to bring out to the hunters out there.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, you bet, man. Hey, Heath, until next time, which might be next week, you follow your hounds and I'll follow mine.